This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour being brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Nummels Wharf, online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory. Great pre-owned inventory with the all-important Sunbury Motors guarantee. They go over every vehicle on the lot. And a service department, whether it's quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Nummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. As always, a pleasure to bring in my good friend Mark Brennan, 247 Sports. Mark, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, so through a couple of games, let's talk about the communication part. James Franklin addressed this in his Wednesday get-together with the media. What was your take on the communication part, especially on defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you have to look at it, Steve, is you have two people involved in the primary communication there who weren't here last year, right? Jim Knowles, obviously, he's been in loud environments. I don't want to suggest that that's a problem for him. But Amari Campbell has the green dot, and this is something new for him. I mean, the green dot isn't something new, but being able to hear. And I'm sure you were able to see it from your side of the stadium. For people who don't know, Steve and I are on different sides of the stadium now.
Yes.
But there were times when Amari was like struggling to hear. He was putting his hands over his ears, and players were kind of gathering around him. So that's why you play these early games. So Ideally, you get those things ironed out, because I think it might be slightly louder for the whiteout game against Oregon, just a tiny bit. So it's important to get that stuff ironed out. I will say this, Steve, and I know you heard it. Tyler Donahue asked, is this similar to what was going on last year? And I don't think it's similar. I mean, I think last year was a situation where Tom Allen's voice was just so low and raspy that Kobe King could not hear him regardless. And they switched to Dan Connor. Yeah. And you've been around Dan Connor on the practice field. His voice, while if you talk to Dan Connor, person to person in a civilian surroundings, for lack of a better way, he's kind of a quiet guy, but when he's on the field, he is not a quiet human being. And so they had to make that change last year. But I think this is going to be fine, and I think it's good that they actually encountered this before you're in the middle of a game against the number 4 team with 106,000 people who may or may not have spent the day tailgating significantly.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that Kenan Stadium is half the size of Beaver Stadium. And for Amari Campbell, that was the last time he wore a green dot was in Kenan Stadium and not at Beaver Stadium. So that's a little different in terms of your ability to hear. Yeah. Offensively, the issue is, to me, is 3rd and short and 4th and short. 3rd and long, actually 3rd and 5 or better, actually pretty good. They're actually really good on the season on 3rd and 5 or better. What are you seeing in the short yardage situations? Because they're averaging 8 yards a play on 1st down.
Yeah, I think the offensive line, there's something just a tick off. Going into the season, Steve, and I probably was getting ahead of myself a little too much, which I tend to do, but I thought this had the potential to be as good an offensive line as they've had since '94 because of the depth. But they haven't imposed their will on people the way that '94 offensive line did, and that's what I'm looking for this week. When you get to that 3rd and 2, to me, it's less about play calling and more about the offensive line just dominating. And I think they have the people to do it. They just have some different people in some different spots. And now's the time to establish that you are able to do that. I mean, you remember back in, the mid-'90s with those great offensive lines, if they had a third or fourth and 2 or 1, they ran, the same play with 2 fullbacks, right, over and over and over. It was basically unstoppable. And it goes back to, I was just doing a podcast and I said, for me, this game for the offensive line goes back to what John Wooden said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was more about if you execute what you need to do, it shouldn't matter what the other team's doing. So people have been talking about Villanova does this 3-3 and all these odd fronts, and I don't care about any of that. I think it's time for this offensive line to show what it's capable of doing and dominating. I think it still has the ability to be extremely, extremely good, but I think it has to start proving it in those third and short situations or fourth and short situations.
Once they get through the third game, how valuable is the bye week, in your opinion, for self-scout?
I think it's huge. One thing I'd also say, Steve, though, is that, you have proven guys like Drew Aller, who didn't have his best game last week, and Nick Singleton, who, James Franklin said he just has to let it rip. I think this game's important for both of those guys. They're both proven commodities. They both earned every single benefit of the doubt, everyone. But I do think it's important for them to kind of do what we know they're capable of doing going into the bye, to develop that confidence, and then to build on that so you have more of a realistic self-scout of what you're all about. So, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely important. And I think one of the things that we've learned about Jim Knowles, he doesn't have an ego to him, at least as far as my dealings with him. And I know you've dealt with him more than I have. Yep. But to me, I'm hearing things that and Kotelnicki was the same way last year. He's a different personality, but these guys are open to input from players. They're open to input from other coaches. And when I think you have 2 coordinators of this caliber who are able to take a step back during a bye week and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing from you, Jim, and okay, this is what I'm seeing from you, Andy, I think that's invaluable. Then I think when you throw James Franklin in there, hey, I don't care what anybody says about him is, in tight games or whatever, that guy knows football. And he has a great appreciation for what's going on both sides. I always find it funny when people try to ask him, like, technical X and O's questions, like media people like me. And it's funny. I don't know if people realize this, but Franklin goes off on these, like, really, to me, it's funny, like, in-depth stuff that none of us would ever even understand.
Right.
And he's messing with us. And I don't think some people actually realize that. But he's got – his mind for football is like something else. So I think you put all those things together, and then, Steve, their assistant coaches, I think they're in a great place coaching-wise. Mm-hmm. And with the level of communication that they're able to have among each other. That hasn't always been the case the last 5 years or so. There have been some instances where they've had not great communicators, and I think he's done a good job of getting really good communicators in there.
Yeah, it's a small sample size, but how do you feel about the 3 transfer wideouts at this point?
I mean, you have to be. I don't know how you could be anything but, if you're a Penn State fan, happy with what you've seen to date. I love the fact that Andy Kotelnicki got Hudson and Pena seriously involved, like, early. Of Penn State's first 4 offensive plays, I think 2 were passes to Hudson and 1 was the end around to Pena. Pena ends up as your leading receiver. People may say, hey, it was Nevada, but they had not had a player with 6 or more catches in a wide receiver, Obviously, Tyler Warren had more than 6 catches. But they hadn't had a wide receiver with 6 or more catches since, I think, Maryland in 2023. So you had 2 of them in that game. You had 6 and 7. And then for Ross to come and do what he did, I think coming off of the injury when they weren't even sure what they were going to have from him early in the season, I think that was really good. Now, the key is consistency. That's what they've been lacking since Parker Washington, right? They have not had a guy who's done it consistently game in and game out. And I think these three guys, if you look at their track record, Hudson was extremely consistent last year at UCLA. Ross, maybe a little bit different level at Troy, but consistent. Pena, different offense, obviously, at Syracuse, chucks the ball around a lot more, but consistent. So that's the key to me going forward, is to not have somebody have 7 catches in one game and then none in the next 2. I want to see guys, 4 or 5 catches a game, and Drew Aller being able to spread the wealth among that wide receiver core, because we know what the tight ends could do. You lose Tyler Warren, but, we started to see it last week, getting the tight ends more involved. And we know what the running backs can do, catching the ball out of the backfield.
And then there's the other element. Your better running plays are going to involve your wide receivers blocking. What kind of tone does a guy like Hudson set for that?
I think they all have done a good job. I mean, Hudson, everybody naturally looks at him because he's 6'2", 6'3", and 215 pounds. I mean, you stand next to him, and again, you have. I keep saying that, Steve, but you're at practice all the time, so you know exactly what these guys are like, and you've been around enough players to know who qualifies as kind of physically impressive, and he does. But I think all those guys have done a really good job, and that's maybe why we haven't seen as much of a freshman like Kobe Howard. From all accounts, he was catching everything thrown at him in the preseason, but he's not quite where he needs to be blocking wise, and not quite where he needs to be blocking and whatnot on special teams. So these guys are all veteran players. That's the thing. They brought in guys who are veterans, who have been in programs where you're going to have to block. So I think that's a great point on your part. I think we naturally look at the receiving numbers, but the fact that they're doing such a good job blocking is impressive as well.
What has a healthy Tony Rojas meant to the defense?
Well, to this defense too. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. When you're only playing 2 linebackers so often, and you have a guy who is that athletic and can just – he's really taking advantage, Steve, of having 2 great defensive linemen in front of him. Like, I think it was like 5 or maybe 7 or 8 minutes into the game last week, and he had 6 tackles or something.
Yep.
And that's him being super athletic and knowing where to go. Remember, high school running back, okay? So there's 2 parts to that. Number one, yes, maybe it took him a little bit to get that natural feel at linebacker. But the other side of it is that once you get that, he knows how to attack a hole, right?
Yes.
He knows how to do that. So the key is not getting out of position. But I think the fact that you have Denai Dennis, Sutton, and Zane Durant playing up in front of him is allowing him to do so many different things. And he is. We saw it last year. I mean, he's a special. He was a special athlete in the college football playoffs, even when he was banged up with the shoulder. And now that he's healthy, he's kind of taking it to another level. And I think Amari Campbell's been Amari Campbell is not the biggest guy physically, but he reminds me of Mike Hull. And again, Mike Hull was a really, really, really good linebacker. But when you saw him, it's like, wow, this is Mike Hull. This is the guy who's making all these tackles. He's not the tallest guy. He's not the heaviest guy. But we're seeing that you don't have to be that anymore. I mean, you can be kind of the size of Amari Campbell and play really well if you're tough and smart and know where to be.
When the season's over, A.J. Harris may have fewer than 20 tackles. What does it mean to Jim Knowles that he has that kind of corner over there that people really at this moment don't feel like messing with?
Yeah, and that's, somebody asked me preseason, who is a dark horse candidate for All-America honors in the Penn State secondary? And I said Zakee Wheatley. Why am I saying Zakee Wheatley? Because not everybody was talking about him in those terms. But when you look at that secondary, nobody's going to throw at A.J. Harris. So I actually feel bad for A.J. Harris, that there are people who understand what that means, similar to Joey Porter a couple years ago. there are people who will really understand that when somebody is that good, you're basically shrinking the field for the quarterback. And who can take advantage of that? The turnover king, Zachy Wheatley. So I think you're going to see – I think it's much like I said, Steve, with Denai and Zane up front, I think A.J. Harris has that ability to make everybody else in the secondary better. And I don't think – I would bet you he doesn't come remotely close to leading the team in interceptions because people aren't going to throw at him, and it's going to give other players the opportunity to get those picks. Now, let's see if those other players are able to step up. I think they will. I think they have great depth in the secondary, but we'll probably have a better feel for that after that Oregon game. I don't have to take it one game at a time. I could jump ahead.
Well, right now the interception leaders total 591 pounds. So,
it's unbelievable, isn't
it? two defensive tackles, 591 pounds between them. Those are your two INT guys. And then, of course, there was the fumble recovery. That was Chaz Coleman. When you look at Coleman and the brief sample size that we have, what do you see in his potential? Fancy word of saying you haven't done it before, but his potential moving forward.
You know, Joe Paterno had all these coaching cliches, and you know why they were cliches? Because they were true. they were true. Right. And what was one of them, Steve? A lot of times players make their most improvement between week 1 and week 2.
Yep.
And I don't think I have ever seen a more drastic version of that than we saw with Chaz Coleman, because in week 1 you could see the ability, but it's like he was playing with his hair on fire with no direction, and which is completely understandable. I'm not saying that critically, because he was playing quarterback 2 years ago. And when he showed up, I was down at the when the team visited the Children's Hospital at Hershey, and I saw this kid, and I said to James, "Who is that?" Because he's so tall and long, and this was like 25 pounds ago for him. But to see how he was able to improve from week 1 to week 2, I just think that speaks volumes about Deion Barnes. Deion Barnes was somebody who was in his shoes, albeit as a redshirt, I believe, but somebody who was leaned on heavily as a true freshman. And to see the polish that was added to his game in 1 week, you start to look at this and say, wow, what is the upside with a kid who is this athletic and is clearly just scratching the surface? I give Deion Barnes so much credit, because it's got to be tough for a kid to come out, and he didn't struggle, but they could not have been easy film to watch. And it takes a good coach to put that film on and see him running like way out of his pass rush lane and taking himself out of the play and saying, okay, this is how you need to improve. And then to see it work on the field, I thought that was great.
What can, moving forward, a Gabe Wosu mean, especially in a big game?
You know, James Franklin, he was hyping up Wosu like I had never heard a punter been hyped up before. And Gabe comes out and proves him right. So, if he can do that with any remote sense of consistency, that is an absolute weapon. I mean, to be able to unseat somebody like Riley Thompson, that kind of speaks for itself, because Riley's a good punter.
Yep.
But if he's able to do what he did in that game, and I don't know that we're going to get a great feel for it this week, Steve, because I think punts may be limited once more. But that's, I guess, the next step. It's one thing to do that against FIU or Villanova this week. Let's see how he handles the pressure of the moment. We've seen guys who, John Bruno is the first one who comes to mind. He was better in the pressure moments. He actually got better. I mean, there's an argument that could be made that he was the MVP of the national championship game. So I'm not saying Gabe has to be, that guy, but physically it's unbelievable. I will add, though, I don't think it was a coincidence that he wasn't their special teams player of the week. And I give James credit for this, because he was ticked that he had 2 kickoffs go out of bounds.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
as good a job as he did in the punt game, that coaching staff's not going to let you off the hook. If you want to play for a national title, if you think that's the caliber of team you are, you make those kicks out of bounds against a good opponent, that could cost you a game. And James Frankel knows that, and that's why he made such a big deal out of it.
Mark, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
I appreciate it, Steve. You and Jack and the whole team up there doing an awesome job. Great for Penn State, great for Penn State football.
Oh, thanks, Mark. And you guys do a great job as well. Thank you for your time.
Yep, bye-bye.
Half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
The days may be getting shorter, but even a shorter day can be a fun day with a new Hyundai from Sunbury Motors Hyundai. Hurry in now, because Sunbury Motors Hyundai has 2025 Hyundai Sonata Hybrids with up to $3,750 off. They start at just under $32,000, or choose as low as 1.99% APR for 60 months. 2025 Hyundai Tucsons have up to $3,300 off and start just over $27,000. Or there's also as low as 1.99% APR financing for 60 months. At Sunbury Motors Hyundai, you can lease a 2026 Hyundai Santa Cruz SE for only $380 per month. Remember, all new Hyundais come with Hyundai Assurance and are backed by America's best warranty. 10 years, 100,000-mile limited powertrain warranty. If you want to have a fun day, you have to drive a Hyundai. From Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, at sunburyhyundai.com. For more details, see dealer or go to HyundaiUSA.com.
Hi, this is Season. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855. Visit our website at purdyinsurance.com or check us out on Facebook to see what we can do for you.